This video we've broken down into the individual features available within Clever Trade Plus. Each section will show you how to use it and what setup is involved. Reorder items is a feature that will allow you to see what purchases a customer has previously made, as well as some of the information on those purchases, or suggest predetermined items to be sold to the customer. We can find this feature within sales orders. Across the top in the home menu, we'll have reorder items that we can select. This will open the sales item reorder. Here you can see the items they may have purchased in the past or items that we are particularly pushing at this time. We have their code and description, and for ones that they've purchased previously, we can even see the unit price after line discount, last unit price after discount, quantity last ordered, and the date of the last order, giving us easy transparency towards what the customer previously bought from us, how much of it they purchased, and at what price. We can simply fill in the quantity column with the amount this customer is currently purchasing from us, for either the ones we sold to them previously, or any of these items that we're currently pushing. But if any of these items aren't actually relevant to this particular customer and we know they will never buy them, we can actually add them to an exclusions list with the Add to Exclusions button in the upper left-hand corner, and that way it will no longer be suggested. So we'll fill in these quantities here, and then just press OK. And then within the line section of our sales order, you'll be able to see all these items are pulled through. We can change these when required at any point. Going back to the customer card, let's take a look at some of the setup around this feature. Under Related, Customer, we have Sales Item Inclusions and Sales Item Exclusions. Here in the exclusions, we can see the two items that we previously excluded from the actual functionality within the sales order. This way, for this particular customer, these will no longer be suggested. We can add these in manually, just filling in the item number as required for the exclusion we want to set. And in Sales Item Inclusions, we can simply set up what items we would like to appear on those sales orders in the reorder functionality that they may have or may not necessarily have purchased from us before. Notice that we can even have variant codes and starting dates and end dates. This way it'll only suggest certain variants of an item if we're using them, and it'll only suggest them over a certain period of time with the start date and end date functionality. You can even use the filters and the search at the top to find items a bit easier within here. We can set this up at a greater level with the Sales Items Inclusions page that we can search for. Within here we can set up what we want to appear within that reorder functionality under a number of different circumstances. For example, we can do it for specific customers, for a whole customer price group, where if a customer is part of said price group, these items will be suggested, or even all customers. And we can use these filters at the top as well, just to refine this list so we can better see what we're looking for. We can simply edit this list and add in any sort of actual inclusion we'd like for this, for any different circumstances, for any particular dates, variants, or our sales types as well. We can also use the filter section if this list has become quite large to find certain areas as well. Coming to the item card now, you'll notice that from Related, we've also got the Sales Item Inclusions and Exclusions from the item itself, so we can set them up from the customer, the items, or that overall Sales Items Inclusions page. But it's from here as well we can see some of the actual functionality related to substitutions and how sales item reordering works. You notice that on the item card we have a toggle called Substitute when unavailable. When this is toggled on, this will use the defined substitutions for this item when it's not available on a sales reorder. So we can go to our Related Item Substitutions. We can see we've currently got some setup substitutions already for this item. And you'll notice as well that you have an at same price toggle and a use substitute description toggle at the bottom of this page for each selected line. This means two things when using the reorder functionality. At same price means the substitution's price will be the same as the item it's substituting in. And use substitute description, if that's turned on, means we'll see the substitute's description in that reorder list rather than the actual main item that's out of stock. I will turn off substitute description in this circumstance for our item so we can see its effect. If I go to a sales order now and we use our reorder items functionality, we notice at the top here I have my Mexico Swivel Chair Black. That's the item we turned on this functionality for and set the substitutes up for. Now because we had use substitute description turned off, it means that the description here is still Mexico Swivel Chair Black, whereas if we had that turned on, it would mean we'd see the actual substitute item's name in this list. In this case, it would say Sydney Swivel Chair Green. The item number there is the item for the substitute, that green chair in this circumstance. And we can actually see the substitute for number field as well, which is letting us know what it's substituting in. This is all dependent on if you have enough of the item in stock for the location currently set on the sales order, which may be pulling in from the customer card. Also in the fact box for the sales item reorder, we have some information, namely the availability for the item in question, its actual description, in the case here where we're not using the substitutes one, as well as the quantity currently available in inventory and on sales orders, service orders, and the like, including an end available inventory figure. The sales and purchase input logs will allow you to monitor changes with your sales and purchase documents. This needs to be turned on from the sales and receivables setup and the purchase and payables setup. Here on the sales side, we can scroll down to the sales input log tab, and from here the main thing is saying what we want to actually log, as well as a log period, which will actually affect some reporting capabilities that we have, as that will show the period we're reporting over. Here I have it set to 1M for 1 month, and I can choose if I'm going to log quotes, orders, invoices, credit memos, blanket orders, and return orders. This is for the sales side, and on the purchase side I can go to purchase and payable setup, and set the same information within the purchase input log section, and it's good to go. When this is turned on, it will generate sales input log entries and purchase input log entries. Just from the search here. Let's take a look at the purchase input log entries first. Here you can see as I've used my purchase documents, an entry will be created every time a change takes place. It'll contain information such as the document number, the line on the document, the buy from vendor, if it was an item, GL account and so forth, what it was, its category, and all the data information about it. We'll go into more detail in a moment, but let's take a look at the sales input log entries as well, which you can see looks the same. Same amount of information. On that right hand side we can start to see things like old quantity versus new quantity when things have been changed, such as when the quantity increases or decreases, or the price and cost goes up or down. Of course, you can also see who's making these changes because on the far left there is your entry date and time and user ID of who did the change. So if I go to a sales order now, let's change that quantity from 250 to 150. And we'll also edit the unit price as well, down to 415. Going back to my sales input log entries now, you can see the additional entries now being produced to show that difference. This gives us better understanding and traceability of our sales and purchase documents. Great for monitoring when changes are made, such as the price you're offering to customers when maybe you would want to or not want to do that, as well as have an additional log for troubleshooting if required. On the role center as well, you'll also be able to find a sales total and purchase total section. This section will show you information about your sales today, everyone's sales today, your sales this period, and all sales this period, as well as the same for your purchase side. What information this shows is dependent on what we saw there in our sales and receivables and purchase and payables setup pages. The information within here will be based on that log period in the sales input log, on the sales and receivables setup and purchase and payables setup respectively. Archive on release will take an archive of your sales and purchase documents upon the release of the document. To turn this on, you simply need to go to the archiving section with the sales and receivables setup and purchase and payable setup, and just make sure you have archive on release turned on. Sales for your sales documents, purchase for your purchase documents. Once this is enabled, if you go to a document, for example here we've got a sales order, after I fill this in with information, and I go to release from across the top, you'll notice the number of archive versions will increase by 1 as an archive has been created as of time of release. This will happen every time I release the document, so if I reopen it, make a change such as the unit price here, and now I release the document again, number of archive version has increased to 2, as we've now got 2 archives, in this case for the 2 different releases. We can inspect these, and per usual, even also make use of the restore option from across the top to restore back to a previous version. Do just bear in mind if you're going to do this, the document does have to be open before you can restore it. You can find all your archive documents in the relevant document archive just from the search. For example, in the sales order archives, you can find the 2 I've just taken here. On each customer card will now be a check on release and warn on duplicate field. Check on release will specify whether an external document number should be enforced on a sales order release. Essentially, if you try to release the sales order and there's no external document number featured, you'll get an error. And the warn on duplicate will also give you a warning if that number has been used elsewhere. It will even actually show you where else it has been used. This means you can enforce data entry in the areas you need if this is part of your process. With these turned on, let's say it's an action. If I create a brand new sales order and try to release it, you'll notice I get the error message saying external docket number must have a value. It cannot be 0 or empty. If I enter a number here in the external docket number and then try to release, it'll work just fine. Now if I just create another sales order and use the same external docket number to trigger that warning, here you'll see it will say external document number, and then the number in question has been found on a sales document. Do you want to view this document? It'll give us a full list, and we can open these up to review them if necessary. That way we can make sure we're not accidentally re-entering the same information someone else may have done, or accidentally entering in the incorrect values. Retain document on posting will allow your sales or purchase documents to remain within the system and not be automatically deleted off when they are fully received, shipped, and invoiced. To turn this on, we can go to Sales and Receivables Setup and tick Retain document on posting for the sales side. And on the purchase side, we can tick the same option within the purchase and payables setup. At that point then, here you can see I have a sales order, which we still have to ship and invoice. In this case, I'm just going to do it all together at once. So we can see that a sales order has remained. Usually in this scenario, we deleted from the system and perhaps archived if we're using that functionality. This way the information is retained and we can delete it later if need be. You'll notice as well I've also got some additional fields in the bottom right hand corner of our General tab, allowing us to know when something is completely invoiced and the date it was completely invoiced. These fields are also filterable on the sales order page if you want to produce some reports with these. Automatic consumption from your blanket orders, even when not creating orders from them, is now possible with Trade Plus. We'll start with the setup, and on the item card we've got a new field for this called Order Against Blanket Only. This field will mean that this item is only allowed to be ordered against a blanket order commitment. The next bit of setup we'll find on the vendor card. For each vendor, you can set if they're going to auto-consume on blanket orders. If this is turned on and you create a purchase order with them, where a blanket order exists with them for that particular item you may be ordering, they'll link together. There's also the exclude blanket only restrictions option, which when turned on means that when you're actually creating documents with this particular vendor, you'll be able to purchase those particular items you've set up to only be linked with blanket orders, without that blanket order commitment being required. Let's create a blanket purchase order with this vendor. I'll set up 200 Amsterdam lamps and 150 Paris guest chair black. I need to also make sure I've got a blanket from and blanket to date for when this is going to be valid. That can be key to make sure this is going to be used correctly with your documents. At this point, I don't have to use the usual make order. If I later came onto the system and a purchase order was raised for this supplier, we'll do this for our lamps and we'll do it for our guest chairs again. In this case, 20 of each. I'll swiftly fill this in and post it for our system, making sure that the dates on this particular order match up to that valid from and to on the blanket order. Now when I return to the blanket purchase order, you'll notice that actually it's already now linked in with that without me having to make an order from here, because the quantity to receive has gone down by 20. The quantity received for both items is 20, and quantity invoiced is 20 as well. Essentially, it's auto-consuming the prices and the Essentially, it's auto-consuming the prices and items and quantities from the blanket order if it exists, even when we just manually raise an order in the system now. The prevention or allowing of item reference duplication is possible with Trade Plus. Here on an item, if I just go to Related, Item, and Item References, if I set up some references, in this case for a customer 10,000, and I enter in the reference number that they use for this particular item here, and if I try to duplicate this again, you'll notice that I'll get an error. In this case, because obviously the reference is already being used. As long as it's different, it'll be okay. But this can even be the case with different units of measure. So I'll just create one for box for this particular item. And then now when I try to reuse a reference that's already in use, I'm going to get that error again. This can be done for customers, vendors, or barcodes. Here you can see we have the usual error message we would get in Business Central where we're using the same reference in the same scenario. But if I change out the box, you can see here, I actually have it where my reference is the same, no matter the unit of measure in this case. The setup for this is nice and easy. We just go to the inventory setup page, where you can see we have prevent customer duplicate, prevent vendor duplicate, and prevent barcode duplicate. Simply if these are ticked, it means that duplicates will be prevented in these scenarios, even when things are slightly different like your units of measure. So you can see here is that prevent vendor duplicate not being turned on, that lets us have the duplicate item reference. This gives you a bit of extra flexibility for how you want to use your item references. Item statuses will allow us to block certain items in different circumstances a lot easier and with some default functionality as well. For example, starting on the inventory setup page, you can see we have a default item status. From here, if we don't have one, we can create our own. I'll create one called pending and one called approved, and I'll use these for brand new items within the system. So a new item is blocked until maybe it's been approved, perhaps through a workflow or just some peer review. I can choose to block this overall, block it on just sales, or block it on just purchasing as well. That way when the status is applied to an item, it'll be blocked, sales blocked, and purchase blocked. And then when the status of approved is applied against it, those blocks will be removed. That default item status is going to kick in every time I create a new item. If we go to items now, this is an already existing one, so it doesn't have a status applied against it initially. You can take a look at our getting started video though, because that will actually show you the setup wizard and how you can use that to apply a status to all your various different items that already exist. In item status for this one, if I set this to pending, for example, as soon as I click out of this, you'll notice that blocked will be automatically ticked, as well as our sales blocked and purchase blocked options as well. And when I change it back to approved, maybe because I've reviewed this and it all looks okay, it will then change to unblocked and all these different statuses. You can use this in conjunction with a workflow if you'd like, to make sure that when an item is created, it's on pending. And then when going through the workflow of changing the item status, the approver reviews, approves it, and changes it to approved, which in turn unblocks the item ready to be used. If you create a new item now as well, you notice that the item, upon creation, will have the item status of pending, thanks to that default on the inventory setup. Mandatory ship to code is a new field that we can turn on within a customer card. This will mean when ship to addresses exist for this customer, we have to use one, rather than the main address that might be used exclusively for billing, but never shipped to, which can help keep your process a bit more consistent. So for us, when we enable this, and we go to customer ship to addresses from across the top, we'd have to select one of these two existing ship to addresses to actually progress with an order with this customer, rather than the default ship to that's on the customer card, which we may be using for reference or billing. If I go to a sales order and just populate this with some information, upon trying to release or progress the document, I'll get an error saying the ship to code must have a value. Essentially, we can't use the main address. So when we come down to shipping and billing, we can change this to one of our ship tos. And at this point, it will work on release.